Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for my unboxing of the new MSI RTX 2080 Ti Gaming X Trio. Nah, I'm just kidding. We'll actually do a proper review of how to take it out of the box. Okay, enough trolling. I know the channel name is Hardware Unboxed, but as many of you guys know who watch us regularly, we don't do too many videos where we just unbox products. We do the Unboxing Boxes series, but that's almost trolling ourselves. I don't know, that's a bit of fun anyway. But today's video, yes, we're checking this card out. We're going to pull it apart. We're going to test it out top to bottom. We're going to see what it is capable of. And actually, I have it right here. And yeah, it's a pretty big graphics card, as you can plainly see. So this is my first look, or my first official look at a board partner card. And I guess you could say that we're going big right off the bat by starting with what is arguably the biggest RTX 2080 Ti graphics card on the market. It's certainly a big slot bending monster. Actually, I shouldn't have said that. The slot bending bit was just meant as a joke. The graphics card itself won't actually break your motherboard. That is a common misconception that heavy graphics cards break Pci Express slots. They don't actually do that. You'll see some companies like MSI, they have their, I think they market it as their armor or whatever it's called, some metal bracing around the slot. And that is to stop the slot from breaking, but not from a graphics card breaking it. It's from basically you being a knucklehead, or me. So the Pci Express slots have a retention clip at the end, which clips onto this little doohickey here. I don't know if you can see that on camera. And some people undo the card up here with the screws, and then they go to pull it out, and because it's quite a heavy card, they yank on it quite aggressively, and it takes the slot with them because the retention clip holds on nicely, and it pulls the back of the slot up, and the pins all go everywhere, and it's a mess, and you basically kill your motherboard that way. So that is what the Pci Express armor is for. Cards don't break it. They sit like that, and they can sag. So MSI has included an anti-bending reinforcement brace or something along those lines that you can put on to give the card a bit more structure, a bit more strength to stop it from sagging in your case. But as I said, common misconception, it doesn't destroy your PCIe slot. If it did, I would have gone through many more motherboards in my test systems than I do. Like most of the behemoths we've come across over the years, this thing does hog 3 expansion slots, but again, that's pretty typical, and we did see this with the GTX 1080 Ti Lightning Z model. That particular 1080 Ti was one of my absolute favourites, but it did tip the scales at an insane 1,675 grams, and for that I called it a porker. The new Gaming X Trio is a little bit more lean, a bit more of a lean beast, and it weighs in at a comparatively light 1,420 grams. So still obviously quite a heavy graphics card. I actually thought the RTX 2080 Ti FE card was quite heavy, but it only ended up weighing 1,266 grams. I guess I'm getting weaker in my old age. Though that is still quite heavy for what is a relatively compact high-end graphics card. The Trio, of course, is significantly larger. In fact, in terms of dimensions, it measures 327 millimeters long, 140 millimeters tall, and 56 millimeters thick. So RIP mini ITX builds. For a big lump of a graphics card, the Gaming X Trio looks pretty great in my opinion. MSI has dialed down the red highlights, so it's much more neutral themed. They haven't gone completely neutral, but it's much more minimalistic. There's a couple of small red highlights on the fans, and then on the side of the graphics card facing usually outwards in a traditional mount. Of course, as you'd expect, there is plenty of RGB lighting on display, though I have to say it looks very good, and there's a number of really nice lighting effects and modes that can be accessed in MSI's Mystic Lighting software. For this demo though, I'm just using the default rainbow mode, but I assume at this point you guys know how RGB lighting works, so let's move on. Before getting to the benchmarks, we will quickly tear the card down and have a good look at the fans and the cooler and the PCB and what's on the PCB. All that stuff's somewhat important, so we'll check all that out. But please note, the focus of this video is mostly going to be on the thermal performance and overclocking. We'll put some K-type thermocouples on there as well, and we'll Gamers Nexus the crap out of it. So should be pretty good. Of course, we will test some games out as well, so we'll get to that and see how the overclocks work and what the out-of-the-box performance is like and how it compares to the Founders Edition model. Though, please note, I only have the stock Founders Edition numbers, as I only had time to test the Founders Edition card in 2 games. It's about 5% faster with a manual overclock. but I haven't gone back and compared it to all the games I did with this because Tim has hijacked my RTX 2080 Ti Founders Edition card. So that's now with him, and you may have already seen some of the content he's doing with it, but he has a lot of stuff lined up I've had to share. Right, so off with the backplate first. This requires the removal of 14 screws, 5 of which are attached to the massive heatsink on the opposite side of the PCB, with the other 9 fastening down the GDDR6 heat spreader. I have to say, the backplate on the Gaming X Trio looks very impressive. I like the cutout vents, and I really like how the brushed aluminium is brushed in 2 different directions. It gives a very cool effect, and it reflects light in a really interesting way. I'm also very fond of how it, depending on the angle that you view it from, will go from sort of a light shade of silver to a darker shade of silver, almost a gunmetal grey colour. In fact, it looks very cool, and yeah, I like viewing the card from different angles just to see that effect in action. Once removed, we can see that the backside of the plate features thermal pads, and these are located behind where the GPU and GDDR6 would be situated on the opposite side of the PCB. The intention here is to extract any built-up heat that would get trapped behind the backplate. These pads are very effective at transferring heat to the aluminium backplate, and that effectively turns it into sort of a massive heat spreader. Next, the massive heatsink comes off, and this section of the card accounts for 1,022 grams of the card's total weight. Here we find a large nickel-plated copper base, which comes in direct contact with half a dozen nickel-plated heat pipes. And of course, they are also made out of copper. In total, there is only 1 8mm heat pipe and 5 6mm pipes. MSI calls this a concentrated heat pipe design. Basically, these heat pipes are used to maximize heat extraction from the base and then spread it through the massive array of fins. So basically, they work how heat pipes basically work. Then moving air through all those fins are 3 Torx 3.0 fans. The center and right fans measure 100mm in diameter, while the left fan is slightly smaller at 85mm, but there is a reason for why that fan's smaller than the other 2. It does look a bit odd, but the reason that MSI has had to do this is because they've had to carve out room to support NVLink, or SLI. If they hadn't done this, they would have needed to provide, I suppose, a custom adapter. Though most board partners already do this, though admittedly they only change the look of the card and not the physical design. So perhaps this causes latency issues by extending the actual connectors. Not 100% sure on that one. In any case, MSI has made this design choice. The fans themselves feature a unique blade design and double ball bearings, or as MSI says, gaming with balls of steel. Sure. Every second fan blade features a dispersion blade, which MSI says accelerates airflow. Interesting stuff, but we'll have to take their word that it's not just a marketing gimmick. Then if we remove the fans, we get to the big star of the show, the actual heatsink, a big old stack of fins. The heatsink weighs 777 grams, and I have to say it looks very nice. It's almost a shame to hide this thing under those fans and of course the shroud. MSI has employed what I suppose is called a wavy curvy design, which they claim allows the air to pass more smoothly across and through the fins, and this results in less noise. The theory goes something like this. The air directed by the fans hits the top of the heatsink. I'm with them so far. If the fins are flat, as they more traditionally are, this wall of fins creates turbulence, okay, which increases the operating volume. The wavy, curvy design breaks up the turbulent air and better directs it through the fins, apparently maximizing airflow and reducing noise. Again, at this point, I'm going to have to take their word from it, but the card is very quiet, so I suppose there's that. Interestingly, one little tidbit, the center section of the fins between the heat pipes features pressed out pockets, which MSI says controls the airflow and feeds it towards the heat sinks, allowing heat to be more efficiently removed from the source. What I can tell you is that the heatsink looks very cool, and as I said, it's a shame this beauty gets covered up by so many bits and pieces. I'd love to see MSI deploy this heatsink or this heatsink design on their motherboards, and if they do decide to take my advice and do that, please don't cover them in plastic shrouds. I just wish someone would try that out and just see what the sales are like, and if they don't sell that well, then I'll finally shut up about it. Okay, so moving on, we've now worked our way to the PCB where we find a few interesting things. The highlight here is of course the power delivery system, which sees 14 phases for the GPU and 3 phases for the GDDR6 memory. There's also an insane trio of PCIe connectors, though they haven't just gone with 3 8-pins, we have a single 6 with 2 8-pin connectors. Before we move on to do some custom overclocking, I thought I'd just point out the kind of clocks that MSI have applied at factory. The boost clock has been set at 1755 MHz, which is a 7% increase over the Founders Edition model, which is also overclocked to 1635 MHz from the, well, I suppose the official spec is supposed to be 1545 MHz. Of course, GPU Boost 4.0 can take advantage of this massive cooler to boost the clock speeds even higher, and stock it maintained 1860 MHz for all the games that we tested, whereas the Founders Edition model ran at 6% lower at 1755 MHz. Still, out of the box, the MSI GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Gaming X Trio won't be blowing any socks off in terms of FPS performance, at least any more so than the RTX 2080 Ti already does, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. That said, I expect the temperature and operating volumes to be lower than that of the FE card. The first thing I wanted to do before messing around with overclocking in MSI's Afterburner utility was to see how hot this card ran in its out-of-the-box configuration. So to do that, we fired up Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and of course we do have a MSI X Trio version of the RTX 2080 Ti, so I went straight to the 4K resolution with the highest quality preset. So I cranked everything up, and boy did it look good, and it was also very nice and smooth, which was surprising given the visual quality. But we were seeing, I think it was a 52 FPS. We'll get to the results soon, but I think it was 52 FPS for the 1% low, so very smooth there, and an average of around 60. I think it was 62 FPS, so certainly very impressive performance given those visual quality settings. What I was keen to keep an eye on here was the GPU temperature. And with a 76-degree reference temperature from the Founders Edition model, I was hoping to see better results. Thankfully, I did get a better result, though it wasn't that much better. 72 degrees, but there's a little bit more to this story. This temperature was achieved at a fan speed of just 1,419 RPM, which I would describe as silent with the card installed in a PC case. And it's worth pointing out that the fan speed was 30% lower than that of the FE model. The idle temperature though looks surprisingly high, though once you realise that the fans don't spin at all when the card's at idle, 47 degrees probably isn't that surprising. And keep in mind, I'm reporting this temperature after the stress test with a 10-minute cooldown period. So it's not that the card's been sitting there doing nothing for a really long time. It's only 10 minutes after we hit the peak temperature. Right, so the next step was to do a little tinkering and see just how fast we can make the Gaming X Trio. After much trial and error, the core accepted a value of plus 140 and the GDDR6 memory plus 750. This resulted in a peak core frequency of 2040 MHz when gaming, and the average frequency after an hour-long stress test was 2025 MHz. Without any alterations to the fan profile, the fan spun up to just 1542 RPM, allowing for a GPU temperature of 75 degrees. Out of interest though, I did fix the fan speed at 60%, which spun them up to 2200 RPM, and this reduced the core temperature to just 62 degrees. Then at 100%, the fans were whizzing around at about 3400 RPM, and this reduced the GPU peak temperature to 53 degrees with an idle temperature that was just above ambient at 25 degrees. And by the way, the ambient air temperature during these tests was 22 degrees. Throwing on a few K-type thermocouples allowed us to measure the surface temperature of the power stages and GDDR6 memory. Our overclock using the auto fan speed setting saw the VRM idle at 34 degrees with the memory at 35 degrees. Then under load, the VRM hit 49 degrees and the memory 57 degrees, both well within tolerances. Therefore, in terms of cooling performance, the MSI GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Gaming X Trio performed much better than the GeForce FE RTX 2080 Ti. So let's move on to a few FPS benchmarks. First up, we have the Battlefield 1 results at the 4K resolution using the maximum quality preset, otherwise known as Ultra. The 2080 Ti FE impressed us with 100 FPS on average, and I'm not saying that it's great value, guys, when I say that it impressed me. I'm just saying that 100 FPS on average at 4K under these conditions is a lot of frames. The Gaming X Trio was 3% faster on average and 5% faster for the 1% low result. Our custom overclock boosted the performance by a further 8% to an incredible 111 FPS. Now, when testing with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the MSI model was 5% faster out of the box, and so a further 5% boost via our custom overclock, making it 44% faster than the MSI Gaming X Trio GTX 1080 Ti. Here we see a mere 2% increase when testing with Strange Brigade over the Founders Edition model. It was again possible to boost performance by a further 5% with our custom overclock. Then in F1 2018, we see basically the same out-of-the-box performance when compared to the FE model, though this time we do see a 7% boost from our overclock. Then we see another small 4% boost when testing with Far Cry 5, and this time our overclock provided 6% more performance. The last game we're going to look at is Assassin's Creed Origins, and again, pretty typical of what we've seen so far, so let's just move on to the power consumption. Here we see a very slight increase in consumption over the Founders Edition model. Basically the same result though, as we're talking about less than a percentage here, so I suppose you could even say margin of error. Overclocking did increase total system consumption by 5%, but then we also did see an average of about 5% increase in terms of frame performance, so that's certainly not a bad trade-off. The MSI GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Gaming X Trio, and that's the last bloody time I'm going to say the entire name. I think, didn't I make up a rule where 2 words is the limit? And I know people are going to go, Gaming Trio is 2 words. Well, I'm including the letter X as a word because you have to say it. So it's 3. That's the new rules. I'm making these rules up as we go. They're my rules. Anyway, as I was about to say before I distracted myself, the Gaming X Trio is pretty much everything I thought it would be. It's slightly quieter than the Founders Edition version, which is already very quiet. It's slightly cooler, and to top it all off, it is slightly faster. So depending on how you view all that, you could conclude that it's only slightly better. I personally feel that because it is slightly better at everything, overall it is much better. But I suppose however you slice it, it is better. As one of the highest clocked custom designed RTX 2080 Ti graphics cards with one of the biggest coolers, I have to imagine what we have here is one of the better 2080 Ti models available right now. Of course, I'm yet to test any other AIB 2080 Ti's, but I will soon. Anyway, for now, I can recommend the Gaming X Trio to anyone with a giant wad of cash burning a hole in their pocket. Anyway, RTX 2080 Ti pricing is what it is, and I've given my strong opinion on the matter in our initial coverage, so I won't dredge that up all over again. If you want to hear or are interested in hearing my opinion, please go watch my Day 1 and Day 2 videos. Speaking of the price, MSI has managed to come in at just $50 more than Nvidia's Founders Edition, which is impressive given how much more graphics card you get. Of course, $1,250 US is still a hard price to swallow, but that's what you pay these days for 4K single GPU gaming, it seems. So with the biggest drawback out of the way, the price, what other shortcomings are there to discuss? Honestly, not much. Overclocking was a little lackluster, but that's not really MSI's fault. These cards are power limited via the BIOS, so any model with a high quality cooler will deliver similar results. The results though are amazing. The Trio X barely makes a peep as it cranks out over 60 FPS and all of your favorite titles at 4K. The visual quality really is breathtaking, though of course it's not ray traced yet. Though it won't be ray traced at 4K, so forget I said anything. In short, if you have an RTX 2080 Ti on your shopping list, there's no way I would be buying the Founders Edition version over this particular model. MSI's really nailed it in my opinion. This is a great looking card, great performance. I'm not shilling for MSI, as some people will no doubt claim in the comment section below. This is genuinely a great product that I don't really have anything bad to say about. I mean, it's not MSI's fault that the RTX 2080 Ti is ridiculously expensive, and I've said so in my Day 1 and Day 2 coverage. But if you are in the market for one, you've gone, bugger it, I'm paying $1,200 something for a graphics card because I'm an absolute nutter, then this is the perfect graphics card for a nutter. But yeah, in all seriousness, great product, really like it, and this will be my new go-to graphics card for all our testing in my GPU test system in the future. So you'll see some CPU comparisons coming up in the not too distant future. Stay That's somewhat risky, but I'm going to do it. I'm going for it. It's a stable desk. Yeah, so I'll be using this to compare Ryzen and Intel processors. You guys are requesting like crazy that I test something like the 2700X and 8700K with this graphics card. And yes, I will do that. Maybe next week, probably the week after. I need to catch up on some sleep still. So I'm pretty exhausted and I'm looking forward to taking a few days off and letting Tim carry the torch for a bit. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, you know what to do. If you would like to see more content on this channel, I hope you know what to do. And if you would like to support us directly, I'm going to tell you what to do. Head over to our Patreon account, join up. You can jump into our Discord chat to us at pretty much any time of the day. And you can also catch our monthly live stream because that is coming up next week and it's a lot of fun. We'll be doing 2 of them. And yeah, it's just a blast. We just hang out, answer questions, talk about stuff. It's really good fun. Anyway, I'm waffling as I tend to do. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and see you next time.